Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session here at ParDreamin. My name is Ben LaMothe. I'm a Pardot and CRM Consultant with Coastal Cloud. And I am going to be talking through a pretty interesting topic, in my opinion. I tend to get a little excited about it, called showing marketing's influence on pipeline with Salesforce campaigns. And if you will share my screen, I will do that now. All right, so this is me, obviously. My name is Ben LaMothe, like I said, Pardot CRM Consultant at Coastal Cloud, 5X Salesforce Certified, and 2020 Salesforce Marketing Champion. I also lead the Tampa Pardot Community Group, and I'm a member of the Pardot Technical Marketers Committee. These are some of the things that we're going to be talking through today. Campaign naming conventions in Salesforce, member statuses, campaign influence, building reports in Salesforce to be able to demonstrate that campaign influence, and then also some of the cool features that come from connected campaigns. This is largely going to be about kind of the more traditional ways of measuring campaign influence using the campaign object and campaign member statuses. But like I said, there will be some information specifically around the connected campaigns. The first thing I want to touch on is this concept of naming conventions in Salesforce, and that's something that sometimes will get overlooked. And I've seen it in several Salesforce instances where there's not really a lot of emphasis put on how things are named in the campaign object. I'll just say email campaign or video campaign from 2020, something fairly non-specific. And to be able to do campaign influence in a way that makes sense, I always try to encourage people to have a campaign naming convention methodology, some kind of convention in place. And this is an example that I've used in the past. And the reason why I emphasize it so much is because when you're building reports later, you're going to want to be able to leverage those naming conventions to build reports. So this is an example of naming conventions that I've used in the past, where there's shorthand ES equals enterprise services, which would be a customer segment. 2020 is the year. The connected customer is the name of the campaign, and email one is the asset that's part of that campaign. So this would be a child campaign in theory of the connected customer campaign. And depending on how long your campaign is and how many stages there are, if it's a multiple drip campaign, you could have a really long accordion style campaign hierarchy, or it could be more compact. It really depends on how granular that you need to be with your data and your reporting, and just whatever it is that your leadership prefers. Like I've had leadership that said that they needed a ton of information. I had a great grandparent campaign that at the top and a great grandchild campaign at the bottom. And they needed to see as many data points as possible. But naming conventions are very important for being able to build reports, to be able to key off of and identify specific campaigns for your reporting. And that kind of flows into the next topic here of when you are doing campaign planning, thinking about your campaign asset planning. And in terms of Pardot, thinking about your campaign asset planning in terms of the things that people are going to take action on that you want to be able to record as a campaign member in Salesforce, and you would do that using completion actions in Pardot. So you can do things through the current email process where you can trigger a campaign, add a campaign if someone opens an email or clicks an email. if you have custom redirects. You want to be able to plan this out as much as possible, because by planning your campaign out here, you also will then be able to plan the larger hierarchy in Salesforce. So those two things should match. So as you build out your, let's say, your 4-stage drip campaign with 4 emails, 2 PDFs, 4 forms, 2 unique landing pages, and 4 custom redirects. All of those, if you want to measure off of those and be able to include those in your campaign reporting, then you're going to need to map that out in Pardot, and then also be able to then map that out in Salesforce, so then you can connect those dots for reporting later. Because when you go to the landing page or the PDF and you say add to campaign, you have to have that campaign available in Salesforce to be able to add that campaign to that asset. So the planning has to happen across both platforms here. And ultimately, I mean, when it comes down to this, you could either, like I said, you could go very, very wide, but ultimately, it's about what is it that you would consider an influential activity. If clicking a custom redirect doesn't really move the needle for you as an organization around engagement, then you may decide that that's not what you want to measure. You don't recording that as a campaign member activity doesn't really matter that much, and that's fine. But that's something that you're going to need to kind of think through at the campaign development level to decide what is and is not considered influential, and what is and is not considered something that you'd want to be able to record to be able to report on later. And I'm going to show some reports to kind of close that loop for what I'm referring to. I do have a poll that I'm going to put out there. I'm very curious to see what people have to say about that. Because I mean, I've seen things. I've seen a lot of organizations are really not into it, or others that are very into campaign influence, and others that are just not sure. They're aspirational, but they haven't quite worked it out. So that's the poll that I just put out there. So the next side of this, when you are doing your campaign planning and you have your campaign laid out in Pardot and you've got the corresponding in Salesforce, campaign member status values become incredibly important, because they illustrate the action that was taken that sets someone to be added to your campaign to a campaign from Pardot in Salesforce. And an example of that would be if someone downloaded, like I have at the bottom here, I recommend being descriptive, completed contact form, downloaded white paper, registered for webinar, completed white paper form, clicked link. These are things that will tell that you'll be able to then look at when you're building reporting, and also when you're on the record, when you're on the leader contacts record. They're a member of this campaign, and sales can see this too. They're a member of this campaign with the status of downloaded white paper. So that is an indicator for sales that they're engaged. For you later on, if this person becomes part of an opportunity, you're then able to identify what the action was, what the campaign membership action was that pushed them into this campaign as they're negotiating this opportunity. I want to really encourage people to be consistent in your naming conventions. I know I mentioned that before with your campaign naming, but the consistency and kind of the diligence is also really important here. I've seen orgs where it was kind of the Wild West, and no one really kept a lock on how on who was creating member status values for the campaigns. And so as a result, they had 500 campaign member status values, and they had 10 different ways of saying completed form. And that becomes problematic for you if you are trying to do a kind of a wider view of your reporting, And you have to then think of every variation of a completed contact form that someone could have thought of. If you're trying to say, okay, for the last 2 years, let's say you joined the company a year ago, but you need to identify in a report everyone who has filled out a form over the last 2 years. You know what you've been putting in there for 1 year, but the year prior, it could have been 4 or 5 different people in there. So you've got to consider every variation of completed contact form to be able to, so nothing falls through the cracks when you're doing a larger reporting. And there is a way to view all the different member status values in Salesforce. I want to say it's an object. I don't recall off the top of my head exactly how to get there, but it is possible to see all the different statuses that people have created over time, and it can sometimes be a little eye-opening and a little scary. Yeah, exactly. Bill just said also what is and is not a responded status. So that's a great point. So everything within Salesforce, responded is everything. Responded implies an implies an action. Responded is if you can create all these custom member status values, but if you don't also say that they equal responded, then Salesforce doesn't see it as being a action that they need to keep that they need to use to configure influence to be able to. So if it's either responded or not, and if it's not responded, then Salesforce doesn't see it as being a true action that someone took. That's exactly right, Bill. Thanks for bringing that up. So I really just want to emphasize the importance of consistency, because you will be doing yourself a favor if you are vigilant about saying, I only want to, if someone fills out a contact form, everyone is just going to use completed contact form. Because otherwise, down the line, you're going to be like, why, oh, why can I not? I know that there's more form fields than 20, because there's 350 that are using 4 different versions of completed contact form. So that's something that I really want to emphasize. And there are actually, and this is, I want to also preface this by saying I'm not being paid to say this. This is just something that I'm aware of. There's an app in the App Exchange called AA Consult, which allows you to standardize your campaign member status values by campaign type. So if anything is a conference, for example, you would fill in all of the potential statuses that could be associated to a campaign as a campaign type. And this is exactly what would help you to maintain consistency, and also others in the org who, let's say you're the marketing automation manager or the marketing ops manager, and you hire a marketing campaign specialist or something, and you now don't have to worry that they're going to kind of go start freelancing their campaign member status values, because as soon as they select conference or email or whatever, it autofills with all the available or acceptable member status values, specifically those that are and are not considered considered responded. So again, not a paid endorsement, just something that I'm aware of that would definitely help to standardize both for today and then anybody who comes in after you. So this is something that I've heard really good things about. So the next thing I want to touch on is, so we've gotten through all these, talked about campaigns, we talked about how important naming conventions are. Now here's kind of the actual influence side of this. And so there are, if you have Pardot, you have the ability to enable more influence models versus the standard. And so these are the 4 influence models that are available out of the box. Primary campaign source model, which puts 100% of the influence, gives 100% of the influence and 100% of the revenue share to whatever is listed in the primary campaign. And then these are the 3 here are where you have some opportunity to toggle. And this is where you also sometimes get into a little bit of becomes a little bit controversial, especially when it comes with sales. Because these three have implications for both marketing and sales. So even distribution model here, what this will do is this will say you have 4 different campaigns that have contact role. There's a contact role in the opportunity, and this person is a part of 4 different campaigns. Even distribution will say, okay, John Smith is a part of these 4 different campaigns. He's also a contact role in this opportunity for $100,000. It is going to evenly distribute the $100,000 amongst those 4 different campaigns. So it's not going to give preference to the first or the last. Everybody, whether they were the source campaign at the outset or they just clicked this link before it closed won, everybody gets the same amount of influence. Everyone gets equal ranking. Last touch model is kind of as it sounds, gives 100% of the influence and revenue to the last campaign the prospect touches before a deal closes. So it doesn't matter that this person has been that this person converted on a campaign a year ago, and then they came through and they did a bunch of stuff. Whatever that last thing was that they did before it closes gets 100% of the attribution, 100% of the influence, 100% of the revenue. And then there's the first touch model, which is kind of the inverse. So this person could come through, this is the first touch, and then they also do 20 other things. Those 20 other things are not going to matter. If once they go to closed won, it's going to be whatever that first campaign was that they were a part of. Whatever that first touch was is going to be the one who gets all the influence and all of the revenue. A couple questions here. I see that it shocked me when I learned that Salesforce doesn't do this on its own. Yeah, that was very surprising too, Julia. Elizabeth asked, if there's no primary campaign entered, is any influence included from that op? No. So if there is no primary campaign status, then it's not going to attribute any primary campaign. It'll then defer to, if you have other campaign status, other campaign models, then it won't necessarily be. Since there is no primary campaign, you'll see either a first touch or a last touch or an even distribution at the campaign status value, at the campaign member value for the contact role in that opportunity. So if there's no primary, then it's going to look at other campaign members, that other campaign memberships that contact role is a part of. And Julia asks, how is first touch different from primary campaign source model? So they aren't really that different, except the first what the primary campaign is. The primary campaign is going to, regardless of first touch, last touch, how many other things that happened. If let's say their first touch is, I don't know, a form fill, and there's a campaign there. But sales can come behind them and say primary campaign is not this. Primary campaign is this. So you can effectively override the first touch by entering a primary campaign source on the opportunity. So whereas first touch is more programmatic, this primary campaign can be changed. Marketing can come in and say, nope, that doesn't look right. I know that this person came in from here. So that is one way that is different. So this is an example of what what the campaign influence related list looks like. And you see here, this is the even distribution model. So you have, and this answers Tony. This kind of answers Tony's question here. So you've got Adrian, or I think this is some of my dummy. Yeah, this is on my dummy data, so it's a crazy name. So this person here is a member of all 3 of these campaigns, and they're also a contact role on this opportunity. So all 3 of these campaigns that this one person is a part of receives equal distribution of both the influence amount from a percentage perspective and the revenue share. So if one person, if one person has several of these campaigns, then it's equal distribution. And this is, I wanted to show you what some of these different attribution models look like. So this is the even distribution. You see here the model name even, influence percentage, and influence revenue share. The campaign name, this is that important point that responded. Primary campaign source is yes or no. So obviously this campaign, this opportunity does have a primary campaign source of LinkedIn ad. So in the even distribution model, this person is a part of several different campaigns. So there are several campaigns that are part of this opportunity. So it's also it's evenly distributing. Primary campaign source. This is the question earlier. So primary campaign source in this case, none of these campaigns up here have any influence and zero revenue share. However, these two here for these two opportunities are primary campaign sources, are checked here. So they get 100% of the influence and 100% of the revenue. And this is an example of first touch here. So there's zero influence here for all these campaigns because none of these campaigns represented the first touch for this opportunity. But this one did. So the 100% goes to this campaign for this opportunity. And similar for last touch. So last touch here, we have email to these two people, part of this opportunity. So in this case, it's splitting up the last touch model here because these two people are contact roles, and this was their last campaign that these two were associated with. So this campaign here, they were associated to this campaign most recently before this opportunity closed. So that's why it splits at 50%. Because it's looking at join date, looking at campaign join date. And so I'm going to look at let's look at some of these questions here. All right, so let's see here. Let's look at the chat. Looks like there's a bit of some good questions in here. Bill, thank you for jumping in, and Taryn, thank you for jumping in there. So let's see here. Yes, Becca. Primary campaign source is more subjective. Campaign influence it kind of removes that subjectivity. So you're exactly right. It becomes more programmatic. It becomes less of because you can change it. It's a lookup. You can set it. There is a degree of automation with a campaign member with a primary campaign source, but you can also just change it. You can say, nope, I don't like it. I'm going to change it. And if your model of choice is primary campaign source, then that has potentially wide implications beyond just you changing that. It could change a lot of influence modeling and a lot of the setup there. Yes, there has to be a contact role in the opportunity, Aaron, and contact roles are paramount. And this is something that a lot of sales organizations struggle with because there's some resistance to creating contact roles and opportunities. It's another click. It's another action to be taken. And so it becomes a bit of, contact roles are incredibly important both for this, but also for in Pardot. Because if there are no contact roles in the opportunity, Pardot has no way of knowing that the opportunity exists, which means that you can't do any reporting, you can't do any automations to say member of opportunity, and there's nothing you can do there without the contact role in the opportunity. Jordan, can you use campaign influence with opportunities? Without opportunities, no, you cannot. Because the entire idea is that a campaign is influencing an opportunity. I have seen orgs that don't use opportunities, and instead they create their own custom object to kind of replace opportunities. And to my knowledge, Pardot is not able to kind of modulate and say, oh, nope, we're going to look at this instead, and then apply the same influencing type model. I believe it is pretty restrictive to the opportunity. And then question here is, if one distribution model is used, can we still use multiple reports filtering out other? Yes, you can. Banana, yes, you absolutely can. You can also, I'm going to go back here to one of my other. There is a drop-down box here that you can use to view, to toggle different views. So if you want to see your influence model of first touch, then it'll change this out and it'll allocate the specific ones. You can also do it by reporting. You can say, I want to see different reports. Let's see. Doug, I smell a naughty batch flow that yells at opportunity owners when no contact roles. Yeah, I mean, I had someone. We one of the solutions that we ended up doing with a client was we created a lookup field on the opportunity that was a required field that forced them to identify a contact. And then there was a process builder and a flow behind the scenes that then took that name and added it to the contact role and the opportunity. So there was a lot of effort to do that because sales just universally for some reason refused to do it. So because of that, we had to create some flows to accommodate their unwillingness to do that. But it did work once that was enforced and everything was set up. Then people started getting added to contact roles, and all the reporting and Pardot started looking good. The funnel started actually looking right, and their reporting started looking good too. So everything kind of turns on the on the contact role and the opportunity. Without that, you lose a lot of visibility in Pardot and a lot of ability to do reporting. A lot of ability to do reporting on the in Salesforce related to that stuff. Julie, can we view this report by account with activities rolled up by all accounts under the account? Let's see. View report by accounts with activities rolled up by all accounts. Yeah, Julie, I'm not totally sure. I'd have to spend some time looking at that. Brian, there has to be a way to make it easier to add more contact roles opportunities. Yeah, I think there's off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But I mean, I've had clients that were because they felt like people weren't adding contact roles sufficiently enough. So they were like, well, let's just add everybody in the account as a contact role, and that sort of solves the problem, but it also introduces a lot of murkiness because you're adding people to contact roles that have no involvement in the opportunity, but you're just basically trying to you're just playing whack-a-mole. You're trying to shove as many people in there because you hope that some of them are going to be right, and that has implications for you if you want to do automations and segmentations and Pardot, because you're going to start pulling people in who are technically contact roles and opportunities, but are not actually involved at all, and so they may get messaging designed for people who are part of a opportunity that really have no involvement at all. Yeah, Bill, I know, it was crazy. They were like, let's just add everybody. And I was like, I pushed pretty hard against that. And I don't remember if they decided to do it because it was a little while ago, but they're like, yeah, let's just add everybody in the account to the opportunity, to the contact role. And I'm like, that is a bad idea. Don't do that. Like, well, people aren't adding them and we're not getting our reporting. And I think they were getting a lot of pressure from the C-suite about that. And so they were kind of in like panic mode, sort of. Julia asks, with parent-child campaigns, and the campaign member statuses, what's the best way to update the campaign member status on a parent campaign when prospect is assigned to a specific but responded? What's the best way to update the campaign member status on a parent campaign? So, I mean, when you update the member status on when you update member status on the parent campaign, it's not really going to affect the child campaign member status value. Those are like you set those separately. So you could have the parent campaign have only maybe 2 member status values, but these individual ones you would have to these individual child campaigns you'd have to set you'd have to change those responded values on the individual child campaigns. Could Einstein add people based on something? Probably. Brian asked if Einstein can do it. Could probably add them. There's some Q&As over here as well. You mentioned join dates and how the attribution was split in 2. I missed the screen share. You had that point. Can you clarify for attribution the person who joined 2 campaigns on the same day? So if someone joins 2 campaigns on the same day, and then let's say the next day they are, but they're also a contact role and opportunity that close like the day after that. If they're looking at a last touch model, then that then that person who is a contact role in the opportunity and they joined 2 campaigns the same day, and then the next day the opportunity closed, then you would have a situation like this, where you have email 2, but it would probably be email 2 and email 3, where 50% of the attribution goes to this campaign and 50% goes to this campaign, because that was the last campaign action that happened before they closed one. So see, do I have to click to answer live? Okay. And then Angela asked, I'm not able to pull campaign product prospect into my campaigns with campaign member Salesforce report when seeing contacts and leads. So Angela, you're not able to pull in Pardot prospects into a Salesforce report because Pardot prospects in this case will be either a lead or a contact. So if you're seeing leads or contacts or leads, then those are in effect your Pardot prospects. The one way to ensure that they are Pardot prospects is to add a field on your report to include, this is my little hack, people maybe have better ways to do this, to ensure that they are also Pardot prospects, to add a filter on your report where you ensure that their Pardot URL is not empty. Because if they have a Pardot URL, then that means that they also exist in Pardot. And so that's going to ensure that you are pulling reports that are inclusive of people who are also in Pardot. So on the filter, say, I only want to include people whose Pardot URL field is not empty. And that will ensure that everyone is there who's in Pardot as well. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time. I feel like I'm getting close. Yeah, Bill, that was something that I kind of just came up with. I was like, there has to be a way for me to be able to know the two. And the weird thing is that the link, if you're using the link itself, it's not a lightning link. It's the classic link. So like when you click on it, it doesn't really go anywhere unless you log into Classic or log into the pi.pardot. Let's see here. How do you trigger changes to a parent campaign member status when the child campaign is changed? I think I don't know if you already asked that. How do you trigger changes to a parent campaign member status? So it really isn't triggering is going to be triggering a change to the status. Maybe I don't understand the question. Yeah, I'm not totally sure, Julia. All right, Taryn, we don't want to sync members to parent campaigns. They are just a way to help us organize all our Yeah, exactly. There are scenarios where I have used parent campaigns and added to parent campaigns in very specific purposes, like for things that are not driven by an action. If there are things you want to add people to a campaign for, but it's not necessarily driven by a click or an open or a download or whatever, that's then when you would add in how I would use that. I would add them to the parent campaign because you can still report on that. You just have very narrow criteria for why you would add someone to the parent campaign versus one of the child campaigns. some of the other questions in here. I don't think I have any more questions. So I'm going to. So this is some of the stuff that was talked about earlier today on the keynote. But this is campaign influence utilizing the connected campaign stuff. These are the engagement history dashboards that you can include on the different page layouts. So this is on the campaign. This is on the lead, contact, and person account. So if you have connected campaigns set up, then you're able to add this as a as a dashboard to be able to see activity around engagement, the number of activities over time, the most engaged campaigns for this lead, contact, or person account, the most engaged content, the content of that assets that they find most engaging, and you can see it as a table view down here for the asset name, the type, the activity, and things like that. And these are things that you can't get at all without connected campaigns being set up. Yes, Bill, exactly. Putting people in child does not put them in the parent. That is something that people will sometimes forget, and sometimes will scratch their head and be like, why would they not be? But that's unfortunately the way things are. This is viewing on the campaign page layout. This is a newer widget that's more aligned to ABM. So it's showing which accounts are most engaged with this campaign. So this is looking at contacts that are members of accounts, and they're also members of campaigns. So it's kind of looking at three different objects here, and it's showing you the number of contacts most engaged by account. You can see your activity account over time. Again, a table view, and here it is on the opportunity. You can see you can see people, and the funny thing is, this actually shows. Strangely enough, this is not limited to the. This is not limited to contact roles. Something I did not realize at the time, but I'm pretty sure that this is consistent. This includes like account members, like more than just the contact roles, which I found a little odd. But yeah, this is the opportunity reporting that you can see here on that for activity to see kind of what the kind of campaign influence is happening on the opportunity, that of the campaigns that people are most engaged with for this specific opportunity. And yeah, that was really it. That's my spiel. I think we had a lot of really good questions, and I honestly am not sure how I'm doing for time. Let's see, are there any more questions? Let's see what the poll said. All right, so the poll said that, are you measuring campaign influence today? 45% was yes, and 54% was no. So it's, I totally get that campaign influence can be tricky. It can be it can be a topic that people will sometimes either not fully understand or will be very aspirational. There are ways to do how is it, like a custom campaign, a custom influence model, and that obviously didn't get into that here, but people can absolutely do that, and there are other things that you can do to make that happen, and there's technical elements there that's pretty involved and requires a lot of stakeholder engagement. So yeah, thank you for hanging out with me. I run the Tampa Pardot user group, and actually later today we're doing a Pardot specialist exam guide review, myself and a few others. That is today at 5:30 Eastern, for about an hour and a half. We're going to kind of walk through the exam guide. So if you're thinking about taking the exam, feel free to go find us and register for the event this evening. And also, yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn as well. That's my info there. So okay, I am over. So awesome. Thank you guys so much. This has been fun, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.